Well, a very good afternoon to you and welcome to this live broadcast. You're watching The People versus Chebukati. It is the 31st day of August 2022, 22 days after the 9th of August general elections. A new terminology is coming out of this presidential petition. If I may quote Senior Counsel James Agre Orengo, and I quote, "My lords and ladies, before you is an electoral commission that is divided right in the middle. It's dysfunctional and cannot conduct a credible election. The Tower of Babel has been brought down." End of quote. Gentlemen and lady, welcome. The Tower of Babel, this is the comparison that Senior Counsel, who's the lead counsel for the first and second petitioner, is making to the IEBC, the body charged with conducting free, fair, credible, and verifiable elections. And I'm now joined by Edward Keta, communications expert, field operations, and the man who was at the thick of things on the floor at Bomas of Kenya. Khadija Chaingala from Kwale County was also in charge of field operations in Kwale and generally the coast area, and Dennis Mbanda, who was the go-to guy. Anytime there was an issue, there was a malpractice. Welcome, gentlemen and lady. So if we may just start from that background. I mean, it seems that the gloves are off. It's like we are looking at a crime scene. But for the purposes of our viewers, what are the 9 issues that the court is supposed to hear and determine over? Let's begin with Keta.
Thank you, Baggy. Thank you to the viewers. Number 1, the court is supposed to make a determination around technology.
Right.
Whether the technology that IEBC used meets the standards of integrity,
right,
verifiability, security, and transparency. The court is also supposed to determine whether there was interference on uploading and transmission on Form 34A,
right,
from the polling stations to IEBC. The court is supposed to make a determination whether there was a difference between the Form 34As that were uploaded,
right,
the Form 34As that were given to the agents, and the Form 34As that arrived at Bomas in the portal, and the ones that the ROs brought physically to Bomas. The court is also supposed to make a determination whether IEBC's postponement or Chairman Chebukati's unilateral postponement of elections in various areas of the country, including Mombasa and Kakamega.
Has it been determined at this point whether it was unilateral or whether it was the commission?
The 4 commissioners, the majority of the commissioners, state in court that they did not participate in that process. The chairman made a decision and made an announcement.
So now we have majority IEBC, minority IEBC. Are you suggesting we have a minority leader and a majority leader?
That indeed is the Tower of Babel that Senior Counsel James Orengo is referring to.
Right.
Yes.
So back to the issues, Mbanda. Maybe you could speak to the rest of the issues that the court is set to determine, and also perhaps give us a perspective of the man on the ground, especially in regard to the forms that arrived at Bomas, what was on the portal, and what came from the ground, because you were on the ground.
Well, thank you, Becky. Well, whatever is happening today is going to set a precedence, not only in Africa, but in Kenya,
right,
where future elections should be free and fair. So if you look at what is happening today, IBC had the mandate, they had 5 years to do this work.
Right.
But the last day is when we're seeing a shambolic election being carried with IBC. So there's a clear demarcation between the forms that were supposed to be submitted, the Form 34As. It should be the same form that is going to be Form 34B and also Form 34C. So what we are seeing today is discrepancies between Form 34A, Form 34B, and Form 34C. On the D-Day, I remember very clearly, we had certain issues that were arising as time was proceeding, where you'd be able to be told in various places, like for example in Shinyalu constituency, rather Shinyalu polling station in Mumias East.
Right.
I remember clearly, Baggy. It was very early in the morning when our people went to vote, but the polling stations were locked until around 1 o'clock. So this clearly was denying the electorate the voting chance, the constitutional mandates to vote.
Right.
But later in the day, what was being transmitted as Form 34As, and then what now was being uploaded as Form 34As in the IBC portal was very different.
So let's assume this is Form 34A.
Yeah.
And I am the presiding officer or the RO. We have done our mathematics. What was supposed to happen is you take a picture, right? Forward it to IBC in whatever format, and then this same form is supposed to find its way all the way through the other centers, all the way up to Bomas. So we are saying we have three sets of things. Whatever is on the portal and whatever is here is actually different. Great. So let me just engage you on, let's go to the issue number 4. Let's keep number 3 first. Whether the postponement of the gubernatorial elections in Kakamega and Mombasa counties, and in Kitui, and of course in Kacheliba in West Pokot, as we saw, contributed or amounts to voter suppression. You are on the ground in the coast in Mombasa. Khadija, how was it?
Kwa mtazamo wangu, tukiwa Mombasa juzi,
Ndio.
kwanza wananchi hawakuweza kujitokeza vile ilivyokuwa inatarajiwa, kwa sababu kwanza tayari walikuwa wameanza kukosa imani na tume ya uchaguzi. Wakaona kwamba hili ni jambo ambalo lilikuwa labda limepangwa ili mrengo fulani uweze kupata kukosa, yani niite vipi, lakini wananchi walikuwa tayari wameanza kukosa imani. Kwa hivyo ikawa hawana ile ari ya kujitokeza kwa wingi, kwa sababu walikuwa wamekosa imani na tume.
Kwa hivyo, kwa maoni yako, ikiwa uchaguzi wa urais ungefanyika siku ile ile pamoja na ya ugavana kama ilivyofanyika juzi, kama watu walijitokeza pengine 44%, mtazamo kwa maoni yako, ingekuwa juu, ingekuwa chini?
Ingekuwa juu, kwa sababu kwanza kukosekana kwa ballot paper ya ugavana pia ilikuwa imeleta issues. Kuna wengine walitaka kwenda kupigia governor na kwa fujo, kwa nguvu. Lakini kwa kukosekana ballot paper ya ugavana pale, mwingine akasema pia sitaenda, nitasubiri siku ya kupigia governor.
Naam.
Yeah.
But maybe to add on what my sister is saying.
Right.
There was a clear deliberate intention to suppress our voters, because this clearly happened in our strongholds.
Right.
There's no way this would happen in Kakamega, where the deputy party leader comes from ODM. If you look at the same happening in Mombasa, where Sam Joe is the deputy party leader for ODM, this was deliberate.
Right.
So, because clearly, when this was being cancelled, it was being done at the eve of the election. And yet IBC had the mandates to prepare for this election 5 years.
Right.
So this happening at the eve, especially now in our strongholds, that was something to think about.
Well, the same has been raised by lawyer Julie Soweto, where she did indicate that it's a concern, and they were wondering, why is it that only in the strongholds of the petitioner, the first petitioner, that the Kimskit failed, and that as well the postponement of those 2 gubernatorial elections. But if I come back to you, Keta, this issue of failure of technology, or whether the technology meets the constitutional threshold to say we had a good election or a bad one, How serious is it to the level that it can affect the total number of votes?
Well, Bangi, maybe allow me to go back to the question of voter suppression first.
Right.
Not just Wakili Soweto has highlighted this,
Yes.
but even Wakili Zahra Bani Jan Mohammed
Yes.
has informed the court that stronghold notwithstanding,
Yes.
the voter turnout in those two areas is way below what the national average was.
Right.
And she has further demonstrated to court that
Yes.
IEBC had enough time between the period when the ballots were printed and they got here
Yes.
to create or to have remedial actions. There was enough time when they found out there was a mishap, and there was enough in time to make the corrections.
Right.
But they chose not to do it.
Yes.
Obviously, designed, and if I remember correctly, Mr. William Ruto subsequently made an announcement that they were going to win both Kakamega
Right.
and Mombasa.
Yes.
He was very, very categorical on that, and were it not for the various teams that went to court to challenge the order by the chairman of the IEBC, perhaps they could have gotten their way. But back to the question of technology.
Right.
And I know the court is still a long way from hearing elements of failure of technology. I know Wakili Philip Murgor has touched on it again today.
Yes, he has.
But really what happened was technology did not fail. IEBC deliberately decided that they would not make technology perform the way it was meant to be. Technology, our elections are not 100% on technology. You pick a form, it's manual, you tick, it's manual, you drop in a box, it's manual, it's counted, it's manual, tabulated, it's manual. The form is then transmitted okay, through technology. That is the point where...
So the point where technology comes in is at transmission.
At transmission.
And how about identification?
Identification is done in two ways. You either go to the BVR kit and you're identified. If you are unable to be identified, there's complementary mechanisms on identification. Unfortunately, in this situation, where technology failed, IEBC then dragged their feet in places like Kibwezi, where Honorable Mtusi had to call me, had to call a lot of people to complain that his voters and Baba's voters were not allowed to vote. This went on up to about midday, 1 o'clock, before IBC made a determination that they could allow complementary systems for ID.
Well, if you're watching us from wherever it is in the world that you are, our hashtag is the dawn of justice. You can catch us live on YouTube, on Twitter, and of course on Facebook as well. Allow me just to read one or two comments. And it's very interesting that even as we are here, there is a whole conversation online. And Jacinta Kithel shows this. Thank you, first of all, for watching. Says, "O God of all creation, bless this our land and nation. Justice be our shield and defender. May we dwell in unity, peace, and liberty. We need the truth." We also have Richard Guya saying, "Fellow Kenyans, petitions like this is important to our nation and the world over. Not only to overturn the election, but to have our court make decisions on important legal questions." Julie Soweto in her submissions did allude to the fact that some Form 34As, a specific number of votes, which was consistent, were being deducted from the first petitioner to the first respondent. In this case, from Raila Odinga to William Ruto. And she did demonstrate quite a number of that. The question then one would ask, if we have all these checks and balances, is there a possibility, Banda, of getting it right?
But actually, there's a possibility. Of course, these checks and balances are in place to ensure that we actually be able to get this sort of things. I remember when we were doing our verifications, these small margins, small differences and discrepancies that you'd see from various polling stations, if you look at what Wakili Julie Soweto is saying, they're amounting to almost about 180,000 votes. However small they are, but you can imagine if it is 10 votes, 100 votes, 120 votes, totaling to about now 180,000 votes. Clearly it means that the president-elect did not even reach the threshold of 50+1. Because look at that, 180,000 votes. That's a lot of votes.
Very well. Khadija, wakili James Orengo alisema kwamba tukirudia hesabu sasa, hata wataalamu ambao wamehusishwa kwa mambo haya, kwa haya masuala ya 50%, ukiongeza kura moja, wewe kama Mpwani, wewe kama Mkwale, je, umeridhika kwamba kura za Wakwale zilihusika na zilihesabiwa kwa kutoshea kura 50% ukiongezea moja, kulingana kura ilivyopigwa kutoka Lungalunga hadi sehemu zingine zote za kaunti ya Kwale?
Sikuridhika. Ya kulingana na mimi nilikuwa mhusika mkubwa, nilicheza namba nzuri sana katika hali ya kulinda na kuangalia zoezi zima la
namba nzuri.
Zoezi zima la upigaji kura.
Naam.
Kwanza kabisa tukirudia tena kwa masuala ya kimitambo.
Naam.
Watu wetu wa Pwani hawakupata fursa ya kupiga kura.
Naam.
Si kwamba hawakutaka kutoka. Siku ya general election watu wetu walitoka kwa wingi, lakini fursa ya kupiga kura hawakupata kwa sababu mitambo ilikuwa na shida, na hata wale waliopata fursa ya kupiga kura hawakuweza, identification yao haikuweza kuonekana kwa mitambo ile, katika hali ambazo watu walikuwa hawawezi kuelewa. Kwa hivyo ikawa fursa, wakati ni mchache, watu wako pale kwa wingi na wengi wakarudi kwa manyumba. Kwa hivyo hatuwezi tukasema kwamba hizi kura vile zilivyohesabiwa kuna mgombea ambaye alifikisha hiyo 50% na kura moja, especially kwa yule ambaye tayari alionekana alikuwa amejipanga na ukosefu wa uadilifu katika masuala haya ambaye ni William Ruto.
Lakini mtu anaweza kuuliza, ikiwa watu hawakujitokeza vilivyo ama hawakupata fursa, utajuaje ni wapiga kura wa nani?
Tunajua. Ukiangalia kwa mfano kama Pwani ambayo hii shida ilikuwa kubwa zaidi ya masuala ya kimitambo, ni ngome ya kinara wa chama cha ODM na mgombea wa Azimio la Umoja Raila Odinga. Kwa hivyo katika hisia za watu walihisi na kuona kwamba ni kana kwamba wananyimwa fursa kwa sababu ilionekana kwamba hiyo ni ngome ya mgombea wa Azimio la Umoja. Kwa hivyo si kwamba watu hawakutoka, watu walitoka, lakini walikosa ile fursa, na ni ngome ambazo zinatambulika kwamba ni za Raila Odinga.
But to also confirm what my sister is saying. But remember we had a call center where we were having people reporting these incidences. As early as 5 a.m. in the morning, people were already queuing because they wanted a change and they believed in Raila Odinga.
Yes.
Now, in our call center, 90% of our call issues was revolving around the failures of the KIMs. And our people, especially in our strongholds, the voting started from around midday. And unfortunately, this was not even extended beyond 6 p.m. So that meant that our voters were suppressed.
Very well. Let's have another look at an issue
that has brought around, I mean, a lot of terminology has emanated from it, a lot of confusion. 50+1,
what is the total voter turnout?
And was that declared at the point where the IBC chair was declaring the winner? Keta, Senior Counsel James Orengo has alluded to the fact that the computation or the figures used by the chair to arrive at the decision that William Ruto achieved 50+1 was wrong. So the question begs is, for the sake of our viewers, which is the right figure? Where do we start from? How many Kenyans? What's the total number of Kenyans who actually voted? And how do you arrive at that percentage? Because it's a bit confusing.
Baggy, 50 plus 1 simply means that out of 100 votes,
yes,
somebody must get 51, the other will have to get 49.
Okay.
Yeah? It is such basic, simple arithmetic that for an institution to get it wrong is a terrible thing for the country. Having invested billions of shillings of taxpayers' money into this exercise. But, Baggy, allow me to give some background on this. On the 12th of August, IEBC uploaded a Form 34C.
Okay. Slowly. What is a Form 34C?
Form 34C is the form that declares, is a summation of the results from the polling stations in Form 34A, which is then translated into Form 34B at the constituencies. Those Form 34Bs are what adds up in Form 34C. In other words, you cannot have a Form 34C before
you have 34B and
34As. But on the 12th, IEBC already had a Form 34C. Now, this Form 34C that they had is different, like Senior Counsel James Orengo says, from the Form 34C that they used to announce William Ruto to whatever position that they announced. From the evidence presented before court, you can see a trail of IEBC trying to work backwards. In other words, the first Form 34C, they realized, does not add up to the arithmetic in the Form 34 B's and A's. So they went to change it. And when they change it again, those numbers still do not add up. It's a very simple arithmetic. Every Kenyan who went to vote was identified by a BVR. The BVR kit has numbers of the people who were identified on that BVR kit. Say 100. The other Kenyans who went to vote and could not be identified were identified through a complementary process. There is a form that every polling station is supposed to have of how many people voted using complementary mechanism. Now, both these numbers is what Chebukati is supposed to tell Kenyans is the official number. When he makes an announcement and says 65% of Kenyans have voted on KIMS, it is an actual figure. Yeah? But when the results get to Bomas, we start to realize that the percentage Chebukati is talking about are very different from the returns that we are having in Form 34As. Until the day Chebukati made his announcement in the evening, we still did not know as a country how many Kenyans voted manually. It's a figure which was then pronounced later.
Right.
But even in that later pronouncement, when you add up the numbers, they still don't make up to 100%.
So at this point, we don't know how many Kenyans voted.
At this point, the figure that IEBC is giving us is disputed.
Because Senior Counsel James Orengo indicated that by 4 p.m. on that very day that the announcement was made, the total turnout was 56.17%. By 5 p.m., that figure shot up to 65.4%. How many people can vote in 1 hour, for example? So in this case, you know, because you look at WhatsApp groups, I mean, everybody's flighting a figure. There is a figure 14,466,779. There is 14,213,000. There is 14 million something. I mean, How can we be at this point, even after someone has been declared, and we don't know how many people exactly voted?
Baggy, it's called a moving target. So IBC has a moving target in terms of the number of people who actually voted in these elections. And a lot of it has got to do with trying to hide numbers. Because if they gave out 10 million ballots for Kenyans to vote,
Right.
it would mean that for MCAs in totality, we have 10 million voters. It would mean for MPs, we have 10 million.
Right.
For senators, we have 10 million. For governors, we have 10 million. But you have an instance where certain categories of elections have got more numbers than others. It is not possible. For those of us who went to vote, we know for a fact that IBC gave us each 6 ballot papers. So why would the governor's votes, for example, be 200,000 less or 300,000 less? How does the less work? Where did the other ballot papers go to?
Well, hold that thought. We'll come back to it. Let me just read this comment real quick. Rhoda Musimbi, you're saying, I love Philip Murgor, because this man is detailed. Even the way he presents his case, it's wide open, even someone who never went to school to understand. Talking of Philip Murgor, who is the former director of public prosecution, this is a quote of something he said in court earlier today, and I quote, the technology used in this election was so inherently corrupted, manipulated, and tainted that the results declared by Chebukati cannot be, in an objective case, said to be representative of the true will of the people, end of quote. Something that he did mention that I want us to delve into, that there was remote access to the IEBC portal. Banda, you want to shoot on this?
Thank you, Beck. Clearly, if you read John Gidongo's affidavit, he clearly stipulates all those and how the system was manipulated. And also, if you look at the report that was done by the East African data handlers, it even gives the time that we had these people remotely accessing the IBC portal. And it even clearly shows the time, and even prior, we have even foreigners, people who are outside the country, who had access to the IBC portal.
Now, if I may just interject, you may be a bit tech savvy. Some of us are not too young. How would I, in the simplest terms, do remote accessing of any system? Let's even assume it is not IBC. This is a laptop here. It has some server of sorts. How will I access it remotely? What will I need to access it remotely?
For you to access any remote server, but what you need is a direct access. Then it clearly means that the IBC systems were compromised because these people were able to acquire the passwords. Remember in 2017 when Chris Kusanda was telling us that he had a foolproof system where there's something we call firewall. So firewall is a system where it does not allow any hacker, any remote access into a system. So this is just a system to prevent any hacking. So this election, according to...
So I can hack into a server, yes, or I can be allowed into a server.
For you to hack, or for you to get access to these systems, you need to be given an access. Because these are people who clearly had passwords.
Right.
Yes.
So then in this case, the question will be, how did they gain access? Yes. Are they persons who are legitimately supposed to have the access or not? Keta also did allude to the fact that there was a particular host at one point who fed quite a bit of information into the system. An organization like IEBC, I mean, I want to believe as a government body, you procure the best in IT systems. How can this happen?
Baggy,
you're not talking about an M-Pesa kiosk.
Baggy, there's two ways. We all know that IT systems can be hacked.
Right.
Okay? What we are seeing here, and KPMG told IEBC this before the elections, that they had discovered a number of people who had access, illegal access, to the system. There were people who were previously working in IEBC who were still authorized to access the system, way after they had left the employment of IEBC. Subsequently, there are foreigners that are being stated by Commissioner Justice Nengaya as having had access into the system. Now, these are not people who hacked. These are people who found the door open. The door was deliberately opened for them to enter the system and do the changes they wanted to do. In one of our affidavits, it's even stated that the PEA to the chairman.
Well, yeah, Murgor mentioned it.
Yes,
Yeah.
the PEA to the chairman accessed the system several times, made alterations, while he's not authorized to do that. Okay? Mr. Chebukati himself appears on the logs as having altered forms on the system. So that's why I keep on saying the tech did not fail. IEBC decided to let the tech not work.
If I may take you back to the proceedings yesterday, one of the orders that were issued was that certain parties be allowed access to the server. You know, this server issue has been a very contested issue in the past. However, what does that mean? There was the issue around supervised access, and then there was an issue about read-only access. What type of access was granted? And if I'm one of those parties and I've been given supervised access, what am I likely to see? What footprints can I see?
Baggy, what Justice Lenaola confirmed yesterday was as much as IEBC wanted a read-only, he said access but supervised. In other words, if our experts want to conduct tests on the system, they are allowed to, as long as there is an IEBC member of staff to ensure that they are not interfering with whatever is already there.
And
So allow, but just one more minute.
Right.
It is not just an access to the servers. It was an access to anything technology that IEBC used in these elections. And not everything that IEBC did at the Presidential Tallying Center is on a server. For example, we know there was only one laptop that was being used to tally presidential results. There was no servers involved in that. Servers were being used for other purposes. For tallying presidential results, it was one laptop where everything was being keyed in, and that's a laptop that the chairman and his personal assistant had access to.
now, in the simplest terms possible, for the sake of our viewers, if I have access into a server, am I able to see, like, say, 10 days ago, what happened? Or can I find that, for example, 10 days ago, something happened and it's been erased? Is that possible? What is the benefit of getting into the server?
There's something called digital footprints.
Right.
What this means, you can get into the server, get the information that you want, whether you delete it or not. The back-end people who are able to monitor and audit can still be able to see what you did in that system. You cannot delete. So if you delete, the end result will be you deleted. But the confirmation, if there would be an audit to be done in that system, we'll still be able to figure out what happened. So even from the affidavits and what we're able to see from the reports, especially from the East African data handlers, that there are certain people who are foreign people who got access into the system, were allowed into the system, did what they did. And the first thing that I know these people did, even before the transmission of the results started flowing in Bagi, is that there's something called a super user, where this person is given a right to do admin duties in that system. So what these people were doing, there was deliberate in transferring of our voters. Because I remember from our call center, what we were able to see there are people who had confirmed from the SMS that they are registered in a particular polling station. But you go there and you have a confirmation SMS that you are registered in a particular polling station XY. Kufika pale bagi unapata umetupwa Kitui or Kitale, whereas your polling station is in Buruburu. And this was deliberate. So that was the first thing that these super users started doing before interfering with the results that were coming in form of 34S.
Very well, I hear you. Remember, our hashtag is the dawn of justice. Make sure that you do contribute in this very emotive national issue. Khadija, kama mama mboga wa Kwale, ukiona kama kitengo fulani au kikundi fulani cha makamishna kinasema A na kitengo kingine kinasema B, wewe kama mpiga kura mama mboga, inakuacha wapi?
Tayari inatiliwa shaka, unakosa uaminifu, unakosa imani, kwa sababu hata mama mboga pia anaelewa kwamba katika kundi la watu 10, basi endapo 5 na 6 watasema kwamba hii haikuwa sawa na 4 waseme ni sawa, tayari kuna mushkil pale, kwa sababu sheria inasema kwamba wale wengi ndio wanaweza kufanya uamuzi ambao utakuwa ni wasawa. Kwa hivyo hatuwezi kufuata uamuzi wa watu wachache. Kwa hivyo kama mama mboga kule mashinani, watu wengi tayari walipoona vile wakaona kwamba uchaguzi ulikuwa si wa haki, ni wa kutiliwa shaka.
Keta, just still on that issue, Paul Mwangi did assert that any decision of the court requires concurrence of the majority of its members. Where do you draw the line between the duty to declare and how what is being declared is constituted? So supposing 4 commissioners are saying Raila Odinga won the election, and you have 3 commissioners siding with the pronouncement by the chair, can a voter be forgiven to go by the assertions of the majority? Is it a simple vote, for example, if it boils down to that?
But ordinarily,
yes.
And I know Paul Mwangi, Wakili Paul Mwangi has spent a lot of time on this. I know Wakili Jan Mohammed also spent time on this. Ordinarily, a commission, a corporate body by the government,
yes,
is supposed to give decisions after consultations, concurrence, and the majority always has its right of way. In the Supreme Court of Kenya, for example, we have a Chief Justice who is the President of the court. The Chief Justice, on a matter that a bench has been constituted,
yes,
cannot by herself decide a position. Okay? All other commissions operate in this manner. The only one that has decided that the chairman can unilaterally make decisions is IEBC. Now, this is a matter that has gone to court before.
Right.
This is a matter that the court has given a response to, but Mr. Chebukati still decided that kama kitaumana,
what were the rulings in the previous times that it has gone before court? How did the court pronounce itself to the matter?
That this is a corporate decision.
Right.
Those other commissioners are not flower girls. Yes. They've been appointed to the commission to participate in the commission business. And there's no bigger commission business than declaration of the President of the Republic of Kenya. There's no other bigger business. So if Mr. Chebukati believes that the other commissioners have got no reason to be part of the commission, then he should go to court and seek an amendment and say, I need to work alone. I don't need these other people around me.
But there are people who have argued that the person who has the authority vested on him to make a declaration is the chair. So in this case, even if you have a different opinion, whatever the chair announces then flies.
The chair is only to make an announcement, because the announcement cannot be made by 7 people together. Yes. But whatever he's announcing must be the result of certain consultations, certain concurrences.
Banda.
In simple terms, Chebukati announced his own results. He did not announce what was agreed upon, not agreed upon, but remember the disconnect between these commissioners is as a result of what this guy did. He announced his own results. Because you remember when Terera was saying that whatever Chebukati was announcing, they were not able to verify. So it simply means that he, and in as much as he's supposed to be the spokesperson, or rather speak on behalf of the commission, he was speaking in his own behalf. And that is why we are seeing the disconnect between the commissioners.
Now let us go back to the prayers. The fine lady who did the last presentation did mention that she alluded to something like criminal liability, that the chair should not be allowed to hold any public office in future. Can the chair of IEBC be prosecuted for criminal liability if it is proven as much? And if he cannot hold any office, assuming that prayer is granted, what happens in the event that you have a rerun?
Baggy, that's a question that the Supreme Court will have to give guidance on. Those prayers are before the Supreme Court severally, that Mr. Chebukati should be jailed. And if Mr. Chebukati were to be jailed, then the Supreme Court should also tell us how the conduct of the rerun, should there be any, be done. But that is not our intention in this matter. Our intention is to simply have the Supreme Court declare Raila Amolo Odinga as the rightful winner of these elections.
Does the court have those powers?
Yes, it does. And tuendelee na nchi. Kwa tumepiga kura, tumeshinda, tuendelee.
Banda.
Yes. Baggy, just to add on that, this, clearly, our prayers, the good lawyer, her final submission or her final prayers is that Chebukati should be arrested. That is our support, because this guy clearly is a criminal.
Well, he hasn't been found guilty yet.
No, he's a criminal. He's vulnerable. We cannot have a repeat of it.
You remember, you are innocent until proven guilty.
This guy is a criminal. Based on what we can see, in as much as we are waiting for the guidance of the Supreme Court, there are certain things we could just see. Because 2017 he did the same thing. Now 2022 is still bungling another election, and 2017 the election was annulled based on the process. And now the same thing we are seeing happening this time again. The process is shambolic, and I'm actually speaking with a lot of certainty that this was opaque, and this guy is supposed, his place is actually in committee, nowhere else.
Khadija, wewe ukiwa mama mboga mashinani, wacha leo nikupatie nikubatize. Na uambiwe leo kwamba kuna uchaguzi upya wa urais. Utakuwa na hisia gani ukijitokeza kupiga kura ama hautajitokeza kupiga kura?
Kwanza ieleweke kwamba wananchi mashinani wanataka haki yao, kwa sababu wanajua ni nani aliyeshinda.
Naam.
Ieleweke hivyo. Pili, wananchi pia wako tayari kwamba wakiambiwa warudi kwa uchaguzi wa urais kujitokeza, lakini sio chini ya Chebukati. Hilo lazima lieleweke, kwa sababu si mara ya kwanza tume ya uchaguzi Kenya inapelekwa mahakamani na kupatikana kwamba haikuweza kutekeleza uchaguzi kulingana na misingi ya kikatiba na haki.
Naam.
Hivyo basi wananchi hawana tatizo la kutoka kwenda kupiga kura, lakini tayari wamekosa imani na Chebukati kama chairman na tume nzima kwa ujumla. Kwa hivyo wananchi wako vizuri, kwa sababu wanamtaka kiongozi wao yule ambaye walimpigia kura.
Naam.
Na endapo kutafanyika mabadiliko katika hiyo tume, basi wananchi watajitokeza wakiwa na imani kubwa zaidi.
Naam. Unatazama runinga ya Azimio ikiwa tunakuletea habari hizi moja kwa moja kutoka hapa makao makuu ya runinga ya Azimio hapa mjini Nairobi. Kwa minajili ya watazamaji wetu ambao pengine unakienzi lugha ya Kiswahili, hii ikiwa ni mchakato mzima wa kesi ambayo iliwakilishwa katika mahakama ya upeo ya kitaifa, ikiwa ni kesi iliyotokana na matokeo ya uchaguzi ya mwaka huu, haswa hususan matokeo ya uchaguzi ya urais kama ilivyotangazwa na mwenyekiti wa tume ya uchaguzi IEBC Wafula Chebukati. Muda mfupi ujao tutakuwa tunakurejesha moja kwa moja kwa matangazo ya moja kwa moja kutoka mahakama ya upeo kule Milimani. Lakini kabla hapo nisome moja mbili hapa hisia zenyu kama mnavyoendelea kuchangia. Apollo, no, I cannot read this, is a bit. Let's go. Lugwasa S. Ali. These are tricks that have been used by countries with dictatorial tendencies. Let us make sure we don't allow Kenya to slide and lose our democratic gains. Sir Mark Enoch Orengo uses simple but clear English. Speaking of clear English, there are some words that have come up in this whole scenario. Keta, teradiddle. What does teradiddle mean?
Teradiddle.
Yeah, teradiddle. Yeah.
Wale wenzetu ambao walisomea mashule za group B.
Group B ndio gani? Shule ambayo sio polling station. Endelea.
Small lies, petty lies. Wanasema kuna wale makomishona wanaongea mengi lakini ni za porojo. Ni za ukweli.
Now, considering the tiradiddles and especially those particular allegations that were made by Raphael Tuju in his address to the nation, speaking to the entire integrity of the process and even the people mandated to manage the process, how is it that commissioners, people who are supposed to be held in such high integrity, end up in such situations? I mean, I don't know, we can't speculate, of course, you don't want to be sub judice, but I mean, you will want to wonder, because these individuals must be the people with the highest integrity in Kenya. How did they end up in such corners? And what will they be discussing?
Well, thank you. Let us speak the truth to lives. Listen to what Mheshimiwa Tuju was saying. What stood out for me in that pressure, because it was a response to the propaganda the other side was peddling. And what stood out for me is that these are auctioneers and not commissioners. As rightly the way Mheshimiwa Tuju put it.
Well, we haven't heard from the other side though, yes?
That's what we're saying. Let us just speak the truth. These are people, because remember they were saying there's certain meetings at 3 hours, water bill, but clearly, even Mheshimiwa Tuju said he can be able to verify whatever he was saying based on the evidence, on the CCTV cameras, that these people came to his house to meet him at a particular wee hour. And he said clearly, he's the person who was visited, that these commissioners are auctioneers. And it pains us as a people, as a voter personally, badly. Because look at the gains that over the number of years we have done in this country.
Someone will want to ask Banda, wasn't there a process before the commissioners were arrived at? I mean, they didn't just pop up from somewhere. I think even Parliament was involved, if I'm not wrong. I mean, all these processes could not serve to give us the best, or are we incorrigibly or inherently corrupt that this is our best, but it's not good enough? Incorrigibly. Yani hatusaidiki. Hatusaidiki, because I want to believe there was a process. If there was a process at the highest level, this is what we arrived at.
But Baggy, let's make it simple. Yes. The chairman makes an announcement before 31 constituencies are announced. Yes. when he's questioned to it, he says one of the other commissioners was about to announce them, then he was attacked. And therefore, he could not make the announcement. These are the petty lies that Honorable Tuju was talking about.
Right.
Because we were there, we saw the commissioners, they were okay. They came out with him. If they were attacked, what were they doing behind Chebukati the first time around?
Right.
There was enough time before Chebukati made that announcement to read out those 31. As a matter of fact, he had a whole 24 hours left. He could have done it on Tuesday morning. Yes. But he chose not to. These are the inconsistencies that Honorable Tuju is talking about. It goes to the integrity of some of these commissioners.
While you're watching the people versus Chebukati, we're just going into the closing remarks of our panelists here. So let's begin with you, Mbanda, closing remarks.
Baggy, this election was about the future of young people like me.
Right.
This election was about the future of this country. And people like us who've been in the struggle, who support Raila Odinga for a particular reason, not only because he's the receptacle of the Kenyan history and what he's done for this country, is because we believed in this country. And over and over, we've seen the people's will every time being subverted after every 5 years. And our prayers in the Supreme Court, we have specific prayers that Baba be declared as a rightful winner because he is. Number two, we want Chebukati to be brought to book because we cannot have one person bungling these elections and subverting the will of the people every time. But this country is bigger than all these people. And it pains me as a young person to see my vote, my ink is still here. The indelible ink is still on my nail. I look at it every time.
Oh, mine too. Right.
Yes. So I want to quote the book called The River of Wind Dreams.
The River of Wind?
Wind Dreams.
Okay.
He says that at a time when the children are turning into, rather let me just quote it verbatim.
Right.
At a time when jackals of hypocrisy pimps their mother's broken hearts, and hyenas circles the babes of men, children should not turn to the evils or demons of ignorance for hope. And look at what is happening now. We have a shrewd competitor who is willing to do anything just to win. And over these years, Baba, his election has been stolen from him, and he's never lost hope. So we want to tell our viewers, our voters, our strongholds, that the journey is still on, that this election is going to make a big difference. When the nullification will happen, let us keep the fire burning.
Will happen, if
Yes.
it does happen.
Yes.
You seem to be very sure. Khadija?
Mimi nataka kusema kwamba hii nchi haitakuwa nchi ya mnyonge msonge.
Mnyonge msonge.
Itakuwa nchi ya watu wote. Na kulingana na uchaguzi wa juzi, kumekuwa na hisia kali sana kwamba imekuwa ni nchi ambayo kabila zingine hazitapata fursa tena, kwa kulazimisha, kwa watu wachache ambao wanalazimisha kwamba uongozi lazima uende upande wao. Na sisi kama supporters wa Raila Odinga tunasema kwamba hatutaiba kura ili tupite kwenye uchaguzi, kwa sababu Raila kuna mambo ambayo ameyapigania katika hali ya kuleta usawa na haki katika ino nchi. Tunaambia mahakama, tunaambia wananchi wetu kwamba haki, tuna imani kubwa kwamba itatendeka katika hino nchi. Na mwaka ni huu, mwezi ni huu. Raila Odinga ataenda kuwa rais kwa sababu alichaguliwa kihalali. Hayo tu.
Asante. Keta, closing remarks.
Baggy, to add to what Dennis and Hadija have said, we have gone to court because our leader, Raila Odinga, has said he believes that the Supreme Court is our shield and defender.
Right.
The Supreme Court is where justice resides.
Right.
The justice we seek here goes beyond the Kenyan elections. The justice we seek from the Supreme Court also is to build up jurisprudence that other countries can use to ensure that elections do matter. And that from what you've seen here, there is an international criminal syndicate that our competitors engaged in order to influence the outcome of these elections. And we want these international criminal syndicates from Panama and Venezuela and from whichever countries to cease operations. These elections is too important, and the fight has to continue. And we know we are going to win.
Very well. You heard it from the panelists. Let me just read one final comment. Pedrotic Eric says, Chebukati's voice is still clear in our minds. Quote, we have displayed the results in our public portal on the screens. Engage your calculators and interact with them. And he laughs hard on it. Very well, there you go. You've been watching The People versus Chebukati. The second bit of our broadcast will be the live proceedings from the Supreme Court at Milimani. Thank you very much for keeping us company. Remember, our hashtag is the dawn of justice. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for having us.
Sure. Tira Diddle.